Well, Brittany, first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I kind of wanted to talk to you. I know you're a knowledge base of like strength training and fitness, and I wanted to kind of speak with you about first, like how did you get into like strongman or strong woman in your case?
Yeah, I got into strongman in college. So I went to University of Rhode Island in 2010 to 2014, and my junior year of college, so that would have been 2013, I was interning at a gym in Massachusetts, and I was actually helping them promote an event because I was doing both their, I was helping like on the fitness side and coaching as
Hmm.
well as their writing. So I remember I was on Facebook and they had something called Boston Strongest,
Hmm.
and I just clicked on it. And the next thing I knew, I found myself emailing the promoter asking what it was. And it was in 2 weeks, and I did the novice strongwoman competition. I had no
Just
idea what I was doing, but I did it.
just in 2 weeks, like you were like, hey, I'm just gonna jump in.
Yeah. So the events, like I remember looking at the entry form and I was like, okay, I know how to deadlift.
Hmm.
And I know, I think there was an axle clean and press, and I at least knew I knew how to clean from rowing. We
Right.
did that a lot. I had no idea there was Atlas stones, sandbag, and a yoke, and so I just Googled it, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna wing it and have fun, and that's what I did. I actually ended up winning, so that was cool.
That
And the rest is pretty much history.
I mean, that's pretty awesome. I mean, they kind of has to give you like a sorry, my mic, I guess wasn't as clear. It kind of has to give you like a sense of confidence that like you go in the first competition that you do with no training and you win. Like at that time, if it was me, I'd probably be thinking, oh man, if I started training, I could really reach some levels, with this thing.
Yeah, exactly. It did give me a nice boost of confidence. And at the time, I was a Division 1 rower, and I actually did not like rowing. I was a track athlete before then, but I was able to go to college on a scholarship with rowing. However, the aspect of rowing that I did love was we had lifting 3 days a week, and we had one-on-one coaches for that. So I really felt like I fell in love with the weight room in general, and knowing that I had that strength. Like that's why I went into the novice competition and I wasn't really afraid because I was like, all right, I know I'm decently strong.
Mhm.
We had done like the main compound movements before, but yeah, I just kind of felt like falling in love. I just
Yeah.
knew when I graduated that I was gonna kind of go all in. I just had this feeling.
Yeah. That's amazing. So when you said rowing, we're talking about for those that might not know, we're talking about like rowing on a boat, like that kind of rowing.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was a teams, like team rowing.
Yes, it was a team. So there was 8 of us women in one boat, and I love the team dynamic. But at the end of the day, like I'm an athlete, I'm a competitor, and I love having all of the sole responsibility on myself, which is the aspect of rowing that I did not like. I have
Mhm.
to rely on 7 other people, which, yes, of course, it was a great learning experience. But like I said, I came from track, and I liked, you know, if I lose, that's on me. If I win,
Mhm.
it's also on me. If you're in a team, there's a whole dynamic that goes to that. So,
Yeah. That's uncanny that you actually like said that because I have that almost word for word exact feeling. And sometimes people like don't understand that. And, well, people will talk to me about football and about basketball at this point in my life, more so watching than anything. But there was a time where I was more competitive. And, it was one of those things where it's like I enjoyed those sports. I enjoyed kind of like playing them here and there. I enjoy watching them, but there's nothing I love more than like individual sports. And I was really into like combat sports. So like jujitsu, judo, like that kind of stuff, MMA and wrestling and stuff like that, because for that reason, because I knew that everything was kind of on me. And if I win, it's on me. If I lose, I really can't blame anybody, right? There's nobody to pass the ball to, you know. And so like I completely understand where you're coming from. That's the first time I've ever heard like anybody say it like that, because that's exactly how I view it, you know.
Yeah, no, and it's, of course, there's positives and negatives to everything, and you can learn a lot from a team environment, it's different skill
Mhm.
set. I think it's important to get experience with both.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so those, I will say like I've never, rowed or familiar with rowing outside of what I see like on TV occasionally. But I would imagine the strength of those athletes, including yourself, is insane compared to maybe some other sports. Because I mean, you're talking about like your whole back. Like, what kind of exercises would you guys do to like get to that level?
Yeah, so rowing is a full body movement.
Hmm.
So in the weight room, we would do a lot of seal rows. Obviously, there's a lot of back in rowing, but it's mostly legs. People don't realize that. It
Hmm.
looks like it's mostly back, but I would say like 70% of it is legs. That's what's driving you off the footboard and propelling you backwards
Hmm.
in order to cover, the most water. So we did a lot of squats, primarily front squats, since it was more quad focused. A lot of core strength, like weighted planks all day, a lot of unilateral work,
Hmm.
pretty much everything like full body. We didn't
Yeah,
obviously like, we only had an hour 3 days a week, so we had to focus on the bigger muscles. So we
yeah.
didn't do like accessory work like on the triceps or anything like that. But yeah.
So a lot of things that like that help drive you in that novice competition, and then probably moving forward, you've got a strong base already.
Yes, I would say the rowing gave me a very strong base, since with strongman, there's a lot of back. Everything
Yeah.
involves back. So the rowing definitely helped build up my back. And like I said, I was a sprinter before, so
Mhm.
I always had really strong legs, but my upper body was lacking.
Yeah.
So that
Sh-
helped.
Sure, sure. Because most sports are like leg dominant. Everything comes from the bottom, that's one of the things like in judo, a lot of times they'll talk about is that like all you see the like the throws and stuff, and it looks pretty from the top part of the body, but really everything comes from the legs, all the stances and so forth, all the power is generated in the legs. So yeah, for sure. So you competed in that competition, you win it now, and that kind of propels you forward. What happens after that?
Yes, so that was like I said, that was my junior year of college. And I just
Mhm.
knew that I had one more year of rowing left. And at this point in time, like I just viewed it kind of like a means to an end. I didn't like it anymore. A lot of politics, it just
Mhm.
a lot of, overuse. I was getting some really bad joint pain with my forearms and all that.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to, I couldn't afford, my parents weren't about to help me sign a loan, pay for college.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, I'm just doing it to get through. So I knew like what gave me faith for my senior year of rowing, because at this point, I don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. anymore. I'm dedicating like 50, 60 hours a week to a sport on top of my studies and work. So I just kept this picture in my head of me competing in the open class the following year. And that's exactly what I did. Like the day I graduated college, well, I graduated and our rowing season wasn't done. We still had a few more meets. And I remember like when we had our last race, like some girls were crying and sad. And I just felt like, all right, I am on to the next chapter. And everything I
Mhm.
just gained in these last 4 years, I'm thankful for. It definitely taught me mental toughness. One of my coaches was a former, she won bronze for the 92 Olympics. So they didn't take like, we were treated like military,
Mhm.
like no excuses, no bullshit. Like you do not show pain in your face. If you are, if you are 10 minutes late, that's the end of it. Like we're doing push-ups, we're running more. So I think that mentality kind of led me to a good place. So
Mhm.
I ended up winning in the open competition, that same competition, Boston Strongest. And that qualified me for nationals. And at that point, I was starting to doubt myself, like, okay, maybe I shouldn't go. Maybe I should get a solid year of strongman specific training under my belt. But then people around me were like encouraging me, and they said, it's only going to help you, etc. And I actually moved to Boston after I graduated because I wanted to be near the gym
Mm-hmm.
that had strongman. So I was kind of basing my life around the sport at this point. Like I got a job in Boston so that I could go to that gym.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened. I ended up going to nationals, and at my first nationals, I actually placed in the top percentage. And it was the top 3 that got to go to the Arnold. So I did my first Arnold in March 2015. And I didn't do that well there. I was in like halfway.
Mm-hmm.
Or I placed in like, the middle of the pack, but I knew that it was just something I really wanted to push. And then I ended up getting a pro card in 2017. And from there, I competed I got 3rd for strongest woman in the world 3 consecutive years. And I've done a couple of America's Strongest Women.
So that's a pretty quick like rise, just going from, just from competing like 2 weeks after finding out, and then all of a sudden in a few years, I guess you could say, you got your pro card, you're competing in the Arnold stage, which is one of the biggest stages there is, right? I would assume so
yeah.
for strong man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the reason I'm kind of like being questioning you on it is because majority of the people on the podcast tend to be bodybuilders. So I've had a few strongmen on, but not a ton. So the Arnold is also considered in strongman as like a very like high level stage,
Yes,
right?
it's extremely prestigious. It's like the best of the best. And then strongest woman in the world, which I've done in a couple different countries, is like, I placed 3rd at those. That's like the Olympia of
Mm,
bodybuilding.
got it, got it. So are you still like continuing to compete in strongman, or have you taken like a step back from that?
No, I have taken a big step back. So I started the body, so I broke my wrist very severely. I had a couple of different surgeries. It wasn't a typical break. I was actually doing like a truck pull, and I don't, it's a long story to get into, but it was very bad. They actually said, there's a big chance you probably won't be able to use your hand again. And I have a lot of hardware in it. However, when that happened to me, I was 26 years old, and I just knew that that wasn't going to be the end for me. Obviously, I had to take a little bit of time off, but I ended up coming back and competing in America's Strongest Woman. But it always caused me a lot of issues. Like I have really bad carpal tunnel now. I
Mhm.
have pretty bad arthritis. So I switched over to bodybuilding.
Okay, so so before we go on into that, you break your wrist in a truck pull, and then you still come back and you compete in the world's strongest women.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
So I'm sorry, I'm confusing my timeline a little bit. So
no, it's okay. Go ahead.
when I was injured from like with my wrist,
Hmm.
I obviously had to take a few months off, but exactly 6 months later, I actually competed in a powerlifting meet because I was really scared to bench of all things. And believe it or not, bench didn't hurt at all. It's
Hmm.
deadlift that hurt. So I competed 6 months later, and then I decided to start training more like bodybuilding
Hmm.
focused hypertrophy. And I prepped for my first contest, and I looked great. And then COVID hit. So kind of tossed that idea out the window. My wrist was feeling good. So then, yes, I did do one more America's Strongest Woman.
Yeah,
And
the reason I mentioned that was just because that's like quite the like the zealous spirit that you had there after like a serious break, which like you're describing, you're still, you were still pulling that kind of weight. That's pretty impressive.
thank you. Yeah, I was really proud of that because I feel like more than anything, that injury tried to test me mentally. I was also in an abusive relationship at the time. So I
Mm,
felt like my training and my mindset, like I kind of had like a do or die attitude, which looking back isn't the healthiest thing. I'm definitely approaching competing in a different way now. But at the time, it was what's right for me. And I believed, like, I remember I watched this documentary called Heal when I was injured. And it basically talked about the science of believing in something. So there were people that had cancer and were told, like, you're going to die in X amount of days. And it showed like the people that just believed they could
mhm.
get better. And I know people listening might think some of that is bogus, some of that's BS, but I truly believe for me, anytime I've wrote down or saw myself winning at something or just doing something, like the more I practiced it in my mind as a mental movie, like the more it happened just as I had pictured it. So I do think that there is truth in telling your mind.
Yeah, no, I completely understand where you're coming from. I don't know much about as far as like healing your injuries and things like that, but I definitely think that there's a benefit in in true belief, especially as like as an athlete, because you hear athletes talk about it all the time, that they envision and repeat how they're going to win or how they're going to perform, and then they end up performing that same exact way. And you have to think that if they didn't have that mentality, that wouldn't happen. And to the injury point, again, I don't know much about that aspect of it, but I have talked to some people that were heavily injured, and they're like, well, I could just give up, right? I mean, that's an option. Or
Mhm.
I could just, you know, believe that I can get better and take one step at a time forward. And eventually they got to a place where they were even better, maybe you could say, even than before. So I mean, yeah, 100%. I agree with you on that. It's an amazing thing. And especially you said that you were dealing with an abusive, relationship at the time. I don't necessarily want to get into that unless you wanted to touch on it, but anyone that's been in a situation like that has understands how difficult just that part of your life is, and on top of that you're also handling all these other things too. So
Yeah. And I think, if anyone listening has been in a situation like that, it's like athletics really helped me focus on something. And then it was just kind of like one day, it was almost like I woke up and it's like, all right, well, I'm capable of so much. I believe in
mhm,
myself in so many aspects. And I know I'm, physically one of the strongest women in the world, and mentally I've conquered a lot. And I just was like, I deserve so much better.
yeah,
And I know I'm so thankful for everything athletics has taught me. Like I said, I had a great family, but we didn't have a lot of money. So being an athlete literally helped me get an education.
hmm hmm
And, as I'm going over the story, it just propelled me forward. And even now, like I work for myself and I would not have the guts or to do that. Or, I my business is coaching and helping other
hmm
athletes. So it's like, I don't even, we all have our own story, but it's like, I don't know what I would do without strong women. Like, I feel like I owe my life to it. So
right, right. It's almost like you have this one like underlying like thing that, and then it kind of like props you up throughout your life. Like in your case, it's athletics, and it's like everywhere at every point in your life you were involved in athletics and it was helping you in some way. You might have not liked rowing, but rowing helped you in some way. Then you go to strong woman or strong man, then that helped you. Now you're like, you're like you said, you're coaching. So I did want to get into your coaching, but before we go into that, you said that you started bodybuilding and then like COVID hit. Can you talk about that? Like what division did you compete in? Like
yeah.
how did you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a little girl, I always thought I was going to be a bodybuilder. I was obsessed with reading the magazines. I was obsessed with Arnold. I always watched, like when it was on TV, I was just fascinated because I thought it was so amazing that you could just work at something and get it. Like no one could buy it for you, give it for you. You actually had to work for it. So I was pretty fascinated with that.
Mhm.
And that's what I thought I would do. But like, you just heard my story. I got into strength training and strong
Mhm.
women. So I always knew that I still wanted to conquer the stage, though. I felt like it was something I owed myself. And I just wanted to see myself look like that. So I did a prep twice, and I made it like once I was a month out, once I was 2 weeks out. And yeah, with COVID. So a year later, I decided, you know what? Because at this point in time, I wanted to move cross country.
Mhm.
And I was cleaning out my closet, getting rid of stuff, and I saw my posing suit because it was women's physique that I was going to do.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, like as everyone can relate, in 2020, COVID shut everything down. But
Right.
I still had my suit. This is a year later. And I was like, you know what? Before I move, like, I need to do a show. All my friends that do bodybuilding are up here. There's a really good crew on the East Coast. I'm just going to do it. So I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to jinx it because I had, done the prep before, gotten so lean, and then like couldn't make to the stage, which doesn't count if you don't step on stage. So I told no one until I was like 2 weeks out, and I posted a video of myself pressing. And I didn't want people to think that like that was a cut phase or that was normal, because I didn't want anyone to just think that I was walking around like that. So I was like, okay, this secret's out of the bag. I'm clearly doing a show. So I did my first, I stepped on stage in August of 2022.
Mhm.
I mean, excuse me, 2021, last year.
Right.
And I did really well. And I qualified for North Americans, which was 2 weeks later. And my coach, Justin Randall, was like, look, I don't normally let someone their first show go to the big stage, but like you have a future in this sport because you have so many years and you have that muscle maturity. He's like, so let's see where you stack up against, some of the best in 2 weeks. So I prepped for 2 more weeks, and I got fifth at North Americans for Physique Class D, which is the taller woman.
Mhm.
And I walked off stage and was like, that's it. I'm hooked. Like, I want to turn pro, just like I did for Strongman. I want to be one of the first people to do both and do well at both. And then to make a long story short, that is, turning pro in bodybuilding is no longer my goal. I will compete again, just not in the immediate future. It took me a long time to get healthy after the sport.
Mhm.
I think, and part of that is my mindset. Like when I was prepping, you have to remember I'm a strength and an endurance athlete. So when I was prepping, and the female bodies are obviously very sensitive, we have a lot going on. I was still trying to, and I successfully was like hitting some of my strength goals while I was, barely eating and
Mhm.
weighing in like 30 pounds less than I normally would. And I was like, well, I'm not training hard enough if I'm not squatting this, if I'm not hitting the PR. And then at my cardio, I was doing upwards of 2 hours of cardio a day for the last few weeks. And I was comparing my times to when I was a cross country runner when I was young. And I was still trying to sprint. So I was like kind of combining three sports in one, which is not healthy, not good. It's just how competitive I was. And I've kind of learned and taught myself to tone it down a little bit. And so I do believe that if I do the prep again, I'm not saying it's healthy. Every sport at the highest level has a health risk to it.
Mhm.
But I think I would approach it a little bit smarter this time around. So we're going to see. But like I said, I don't define my worth by getting a pro card. Like, I feel like for a while, my whole identity was like Brittany Diamond, the pro strong woman.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to be just a bodybuilder. Like, I wanted to be known more for coaching. And I actually just recently wrote an article that kind of describes all my feelings on that. And I titled it Retired Athlete Accepting the Death, because it is like a death. So, like I said, not retired forever, but for the immediate future, I do not have any plans to compete anything.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty deep, because it's like when you identify yourself as like an athlete and you're not actively competing, it can play, tricks like on your mind too. I've kind of experienced that myself. I've talked to some people that have done that too. A lot of times people will age out, like they're not good enough to go to the elite level. Not saying that's in your case, that's the case, but like for me, like I wasn't good enough to go to elite levels in certain sports, but I got older. So like I'm not going to compete with children anymore. So what happens is you kind of lose your competitive edge. I was talking to my wife. It's like, I don't like, I feel like I need to compete, but I'm not, but there's nothing for me to compete in. So it's like, I started looking into other things like Spartan races and other things that will kind of get my blood pumping. So I completely understand where you're coming from. Well, it's like your identity is kind of tied in into being an athlete, but as you said, like you kind of want to be known now, and you are as a coach. So, can you talk about that? Like, what do you do now with all this knowledge base, all this understanding of fitness, athletics, strength?
Absolutely, yes. And I love being a coach. So I have coached, oh my gosh, my first job ever when I was like 14. I worked at the Cape Ann YMCA and the fitness floor just wiping down machines. And once I was 18, I got my certifications and I always personal trained or taught classes on the side.
Mhm.
But I never thought it would be like a main job because one of my goals was to make a lot of money. And I was always kind of told that you can't make that much money as a trainer.
Mm.
And I was too young to realize that, the world, you can do whatever you want in the world, and money shouldn't be the first thing you think of. But anyways, I ended up getting into medical and pharma sales after college and always just trained on the side. I started coaching for strong women just online and on the side. And like, I wasn't thinking at the time, like, how can I make money off this? I was just sharing my knowledge and my expertise and trying to help other women and grow the sport. And then, at one point I had like 15 people that I was helping online. And I was like, this is a lot. Like I am staying up after work and answering. I was like, I should start to charge. So I started charging, not a lot. And then I started doing seminars. And I in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, like I could make this my full-time job, but I was still really scared to leave the corporate world because I liked traveling and I liked having that structure.
Mhm.
I just wasn't sure how I would do just being on the computer all day, like talking to people. But needless to say, I left in COVID. COVID was a blessing for me because my job, which was always on the road and traveling, ended up being 100% remote. And that's when I decided, like, now is the time to take the plunge.
Mhm.
Like, we're probably going to get fired anyways because they don't really need us. So I might as well do it. And that's what I did. And I had a brief stunt last year where I went back to corporate for like a day because
Mhm.
I got offered this job that I thought was related to my brand and my mission. It was in the gym community. And then I quickly
Mhm.
saw that they were just kind of using me, I guess,
Mm.
for my name.
What do you like? Can you Are you able? You don't have to say like names or anything, but like what were they doing?
It was a company that manufactured different strength equipment,
Mhm.
and they told me that like what you do outside of work is fine. And then the next thing I know, when I got to their corporate gym, they told me like, okay, on your social media, you can only post this and
Oh
that.
no,
They didn't make strongman equipment, so I was just like, hell no. So I was like, you know what? I'm never working for someone else again.
that's terrible. That's a terrible experience to have. To
Yeah, yeah. So,
so
yeah, the
I
rest is history.
Yeah, I had a quick question for you. I know you mentioned it a little while back, but I wanted to touch on that. You said you had about 15 clients, you were like, at that point you're like, well, maybe I should start charging because this is basically, I'm basically running a business, right? At this
Yeah.
point. How did the clients take that? Like, for those who maybe are in that position right now, who are doing it kind of for free, but they have enough where they could start their own business. Did your clients, were they like irritated? Did they accept
No,
that? Okay.
no,
Can
not
you?
at all. No, they were like, I can't believe that you even, a lot of them couldn't even believe that I was doing that. There was like
Got
one
it.
young girl I coached that couldn't afford anything. So I coached her for free. And I do think that is part of any coaching business is you take athletes if they have potential and they're doing the work and you work with them well. If they can't afford it, that's just part of it. Like
Mhm.
your job is to be a mentor and a role model, and you truly have to love what you're doing, or it's obvious you don't do a
Mhm.
good job.
Mhm.
Because I've seen people that don't really care about clients. It's sad. It's a big problem in the online coaching world.
Yeah, no, for sure. A lot of times in the online coaching world, the problem is you're not even talking to the real coach. sometimes that's a big issue. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah,
things
I've
like
heard
that.
that.
It's like they just kind of do a cookie cutter, type of diet for all those who aren't as important. That happens in the bodybuilding, and the ones that are like higher elite level bodybuilders, they'll take care of them personally. The rest they just send kind of cookie cutter like diets, which is kind of crappy to do, right? Like
Yeah.
that's yeah. But you say like you would advise people, hey, if you've got enough of a client base and go ahead and switch over to charging without being too concerned. Like that's the route that you would
Yes,
suggest.
that's absolutely the route. And I've raised my prices, plenty of times, and I've never had anyone have an issue. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, to your point about just like you who took somebody who wasn't able to afford it. I was just listening before we got on to Jay Cutler and his podcast, and he was saying how Chris Aceto, his first coach, didn't charge him anything because he said he saw potential in me. He's like, you'll take care of me later when you have money. Right now, don't worry about it. So yeah, to your point, like good coaches, they can see talent. They're not necessarily concerned about money. So
Exactly. Yeah.
for sure. So you start coaching, you start your own business. Now, do you just work with athletes or do you work with like lifestyle type of clients?
For the first 3 years, I only worked with strength athletes.
Hmm.
And then I started dabbling, like I got a couple of different through precision nutrition degrees for nutrition and learning more about that. So then I started helping strength athletes with weight cuts. And then I kept getting asked, from people at the gym or just regular people at work, were like, can you help me with a diet? And I always said no. And then one day I was like, I know enough. Like, why don't I do lifestyle? So I do a bit of both.
Hmm.
I would say it's about half and half now.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine like most of the people that I talk to that are coaches, they enjoy the athletic side of it because it's kind of like in that industry that they're used to and they love. But they say that the majority of, and in your case, you said it's 50-50, but for them, it was like the majority was lifestyle because you have way more people that are interested in, weight loss and just getting in shape than you do people trying to live their athletic dreams.
Exactly. And I love working with both. And I'm actually finding that lifestyle can almost be more rewarding for me because then you hear the stories. Like when I coach athletes, it's like, they have the same mindset as me where like they're never really happy. Like it's always like, let's go on to the next thing. What are the next
Mhm.
goals? What are we going to do next? Where
Mhm.
lifestyle people, like if they lose weight or if they start having a better relationship with food, or if it even improves their marriage, like they're more thankful for it. And you can
Mhm.
actually see it affecting their lives, which of course with athletes, like you can see it affecting their lives too, but it's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah,
And
it hits.
I didn't expect, yeah,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't
I
mean to
didn't
interrupt.
expect to like coaching lifestyle as much as I do.
Yeah. Are most of your lifestyle clients male or female?
Mostly female.
Hmm.
I think I have two male, but yeah, I have a big chunk of my yeah, female.
What about athletic clients?
Athletics is about, I think I still have more women. It comes and goes. I would say right
Mhm.
now I have more women, but usually it's about the same.
So you have no issues or concerns with like you can train men and women exactly the same way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, men are actually much easier to coach than women. And I don't mean that in like a funny way.
Okay.
Honestly, because like there's not as many hormonal imbalances.
I see. Okay. I
Women,
see
I
what.
look at all the different, especially for strength training in general, like there's different phases when the strength is going to plummet. So females, it's a little more like personal and like detail oriented, where men, it's kind of just like, okay, like I know you're going to get strong if you do this. And there's less margin for error, I would say, with
Mhm. I see. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I thought you were like just trying to be funny, but I see what you're talking
no.
about. Yeah. Okay. So do you have is there like a strength training program that you put somebody on? Like, is it, and I know I don't expect you to go like into details or anything, but is it like incremental? Like you used to have a goal where, okay, like in bodybuilding, you'll have a goal where it's like, okay, in 12 weeks, I want to be this lean. I want to be able to step on stage at this level, whatever, this conditioning. In strength training, is it the same way where you're like, okay, 12 weeks out, I need to be able to lift this much weight? And what are we doing from here to there? Or like, how does it work?
Yeah, so it completely just depends on like if someone like a lot of times strength athletes will have two different shows coming up. So we kind of have to intertwine training. Like the goal is obviously to peak. Um, and bodybuilding training is more hypertrophy. And it's, for me, it's really boring to program for because it's pretty basic. Um, whereas strength training is more of like an art, especially if it's strongman. So I have to look at like what equipment do they have access to? What days can they train for 4 hours? Because setting up equipment takes a long time. How is that going to impact recovery? So it's more of like I look at when I'm making a strongman program. It takes me a while, and I kind of get excited. It's like putting a puzzle together. So it can be a little frustrating when like I'm looking at the list of equipment and what they're prepping for. And I'm like, oh, I want to do this and this, but like that's not realistic for their training. You got to be careful because with strongman training you can get injured because you do need to practice the events. You need that hands-on implement time to learn the skill. Just I guess like for people listening, for bodybuilding, like you need to put in the work with posing. You need to put in the work, like you need to film all your lifts. You got to get, there's, for example, like a sandbag pick is often something that's in strongman as part of a medley. You have to video yourself picking the sandbag because you got to look at like how can I pick this better and shave 0.2 seconds off my time. So it's more like that. So it is fun to program for, but yes, you definitely
Sure.
want to peak for a certain event. Yeah.
That's interesting the way you describe that, because it's almost like you're combining like strength with speed. Like it's a combination of that.
So strongman training is I love programming for it because it's not like powerlifting where it's just like, okay, I'm trying to get to a 1 rep max for 3 lifts. There could be like for strongman, you could every contest is different, but you could be maxing out on your press, but then you could have something that you're doing like 20 to 30 reps in. So it's more like programming for football, honestly, because and it's such a stigma that strongman athletes are fat. Like I've heard that before. But if you look at like middleweight pro women, like we all are pretty much built the same, where we have huge shoulders, huge back, big legs. We can move fast. We can run. We can lift heavy. So I think that's just a stigma.
Yeah, that was so I was just about to ask you that. Like, what kind of physiques do you generally see in I guess strongman for women? But you just mentioned that. So you said it's not a matter of I'm just gonna pound calories until I can't, eat anymore. It's
No.
there's actually like a real like physique that you get from training this way.
Yeah, like at the amateur level, maybe not so much, but at the pro level, and there's weight classes. So lightweight and middleweight women are pretty damn, you can't be 5% body fat for a competition. Like that wouldn't be good for the joints. You don't want to
Right,
be
right.
shredded, but yeah, we definitely, you look at us and you're like, wow, like that's an athlete. And it can be confusing because people from like outside sports will be like, is that bodybuilding? Is that a CrossFit athlete? Like, what kind of athlete is that?
Sure, sure. No, no, I completely get it. And it makes sense when you think about like there's weight classes. So obviously
Yeah.
someone who's going to be heavier might not, like there's going to be different physiques the heavier you go and then like the lighter you go, just like every sport, right? So, that makes total sense. Um yeah, oh man, I was going to ask you something now I just completely went blank. What was it? Oh man. That's interesting. Okay, never mind. Well, if it comes back to me, I'll ask it. But so at this point, like if somebody wanted to, and I guess we can go ahead and kind of wrap up, but if someone wanted to reach out to you to like, to start like being one of your clients or maybe get you on another podcast to talk about your passion, which is, coaching, how would they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's my job to talk to people all day pretty much. So Instagram or Facebook are primarily the one I use. So on Instagram, it's just B Dimes, B_Dimes, Dimez. Yes, Brittany Diamond. That's my real name. People always ask, like, is that a stage name? Like, nope, that's my real name. So it's B Dimes, and then you can reach out. Yeah, and I do. Oh, are you there still?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why my computer just like it went blank there. Okay. Yeah.
I saw like a light on your face all of a sudden.
Yeah. So yeah, you can reach out. And I love, not just coaching. I love having genuine conversations because I like what we touched upon
Mhm.
about, the retired athlete mindset. I think that's really important. And one of my next business goals is actually to show people how to build a business online, have systems in place. So I'll be
That's
offering that soon.
Yeah, so important because there's so many people now that are trying to take advantage of social media and other things to build their brand, whatever that, brand might be in fitness, might be in something else. So I think that would be like extremely, beneficial for people. I'll link everything at the bottom, guys. So it's, it'll be easy for you to get to whatever you need to with regard to Brittany. But I did remember what I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
So as far as recovery for a sport like that that's so tough on your body, like what did you do, or what do you recommend that people do? Like, are there massages, are there like just other things that people
Yeah.
need to consider?
Yeah, so there's so many different modalities, and especially with strongman, it's like every workout is so taxing on your CNS because it's not like, you're not focusing on a body part until you're doing accessory. And before that, you have like 2 hours of compound movements plus events. So you're getting pretty beat up. What I always did when I was competing like that, I did a lot of contrast showers. I went to a Brian Shaw seminar and he recommended that. So I kind of just started doing those. And then I always did a lot of steady state cardio. Like I felt like walking really helped. And a lot of people would give me crap, like Brittany's always doing cardio. And I'm like, I really feel like it flushes me out. Like
Mhm.
obviously not doing HIIT or anything like that, but like that steady state walking or something just helped me a lot.
Mhm.
And then, sleeping, eating enough. I definitely noticed like if for a strong woman, I had to be under 180, and a lot of times I'd water cut to that because I didn't want to be in a caloric deficit the whole time. So I would do a
Mhm.
water cut so that I couldn't be eating enough and recovering.
Got it. So yeah, okay. Well, you said you mentioned something, and I'm not sure I even know what that is. It's you said contrast showers. Is that
Yeah,
what is that?
contrast showers. I'm just gonna put my light on because it's getting dark out here too.
Okay,
So,
all right.
so a contrast shower is when you alternate between really, really hot and then really cold just in the shower. So it's kind of
I
like
see.
simulating like an ice bath and jumping to the hot tub. But obviously, a lot of us don't have that in our home. So yeah, I would just do a contrast shower. And Brian Shaw said always finish with it cold. So that was just something that I remember
Hmm.
doing. It's
Okay,
been
well,
proven now. It's been proven now that helps a lot with the brain and increasing dopamine too. So it's just good for you in general.
that's interesting. Yeah, like I've heard of one or the other, but I've never heard like back to back like that. But it makes sense. That would be just like going to a sauna and go and doing like
Yeah.
a what do you call it, ice bath. I'll tell you what, I got like a little tub or whatever, and I was gonna do an ice bath. And I was gonna be like, okay, this is my gonna be my regular routine. I did not take into account of how much ice I would actually need to fill up that bathtub. It's a ton of ice. I'm like,
Yeah.
is this even realistic? I'm like,
Yeah.
so, but it's beneficial if you can do it for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Just try the, I mean, try the contrast showers. It's funny because I still try and do it now, like after a heavy like leg session or back session or something, but I'm
mhm.
in Vegas, so it doesn't like the water won't even get that cold.
Is
I
it
might
just so
need to
hot
do the ice
outside?
bath.
That's funny. That's too funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, Brittany, I don't want to take up a ton of your time because I know you already gave so much and so much of your life, talking about it and just your passions and your interests. So I'm glad I was able to get you on the show. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for your
Thank
time.
you. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. Well, you have a great rest of the evening.
You too,
Take care. Bye bye.
fireman.